Hello everyone, welcome back to Ansarkari. So, continuing our topics from macroeconomics for economics optional, we are done with the Keynesian aggregate demand, aggregate supply model, and then secondly, we did the Hicks and Hansen model, which is also known as the ISLM model. So, from that only, we can pick up some smaller subtopics, which again requires clarity and are important for understanding of again the topics that will be discussing further. So first is the classical aggregate demand model. What are the thoughts of the classical economist on aggregate demand? So they have not explicitly given a dedicated model which is talking about the aggregate demand, what is going to be the impact, how it is determining. So for this, we will be using the quantity theory of money. So in this, we have seen how do we write the equation is where M is the quantity of money, V is the velocity of money, P is price level, and Y is the total output. So we can write Y as this, in which we assume velocity of money is constant. So the diagrammatic representation. So aggregate supply curve would be perfectly inelastic. We have downward sloping aggregate demand curve, the price level on y-axis, and national output on the x-axis. So in this case, we are at equilibrium at this particular point. This is, you can say, the full employment model being represented. Now, if we say that, let's say the price increases. So in that case, we can represent it like this, a higher price, and you can see output has reduced. Because at higher prices, the purchasing power reduces in the economy, and because purchasing power is reducing, so in a way we can say aggregate demand has reduced in the economy. So that is why we are seeing fall in the real national output in the economy. So increase in the money supply, this is another scenario. Increase in money supply, it will shift the aggregate demand curve upwards, or we can say rightwards, and it will lead to demand pull inflation, because there is more money in the hands of the people because of increase in money supply. So because aggregate demand is increasing, that is why there is demand pull inflation in the economy. And in the graph, we can draw it like this. So this will be the new aggregate demand curve. Now, we can come to the conclusion that according to the classicals, they say or they believe that to control the price stability, controlling the money supply is important in the economy. So it is ultimately what are the changes being done or happening in the money supply or the liquidity in the economy that would be determining price stability, or again, as we talk about, it has direct impact on the inflation in the economy. And the same belief is also seen in case of the monetarist school of thought, where in monetarist we see Milton Friedman is the most prominent name. So this is one small subtopic. Now we will discuss about classical dichotomy, and related to this is the neutrality of money. This is also within the classical school. So in this case, neutrality of money simply implies that money as a variable, which is again a stock variable in the economy, will impact only the nominal variables. Nominal variables includes, for example, the prices in the economy, nominal, you can say wages, and we can say nominal interest rate also. So that is why we say money only impacting nominal variables, or in other words, we can say that money's impact on deciding the real variables is neutral. And real variables includes employment, then real wages which are written as W divided by the price level. And you can say, for example, another would be real output or the real income. And these real variables are, if they are not being impacted by the quantity of money in the economy, then what is impacting them? So there are three other things like labor supply, capital stock, and state of technology in the economy. They will impact directly all these real variables which are being mentioned. So dichotomy, when we stated the term dichotomy, classical dichotomy, so dichotomy is that money is neutral in determining the real variables. And graphically, when we represent this, so all the curves which are related to supply of any variable and the classical school will always be perfectly inelastic. Like here we have the aggregate supply curve, downward sloping aggregate demand curve. Then we will draw labor market. We have real wages, the amount of labor which is employed. So this is supply of labor. This is demand of labor. Equilibrium is at point E. So if you can say this is the real wage rate here. This is amount of labor employed. And here, third panel would be showcasing production function in the economy, which is being determined by the labor employed or the labor supply and the capital stock. So capital stock is assumed to be constant here. So we will extrapolate the labor employed, and this is the amount of output in the economy. Now here, if we see, for example, let's say, because we're talking about neutrality of money, so if we assume that money supply, let's say it falls in the economy, so aggregate demand will fall. Here you can see the price has reduced. If price reduce, it means real wage will increase. So when real wage increases to the new level, we will see this is, let's say, AK. AK is the amount of excess supply of labor in the economy, which is generated. But again, the impact is only limited up till here. It is impacting the labor supply, but there is going to be no change in the full employment and the full employment output in the economy. So that is again determining that the money is not having any impact on the real variables. So fall in the money supply, see real output is same. So this is the second concept. Thirdly, we will talk about the Keynes monetary theory. So Keynes, his beliefs were completely opposite to that of the classicals. He believed that money plays important role in deciding the real variables. So he explained the direct relationship between them, how that works. We have already discussed in detail about the integration of the goods and the money market under the ISLM model. So with these two markets, we have seen that changes in the interest rate, which are caused by either changes in money supply or changes in the money demand, will directly impact the level of investment in the economy. And if the investment changes, it will directly impact the aggregate demand. And aggregate demand will determine the national income in the economy, and you can see the employment, the final thing that we have to determine. So there is a direct relationship here. So money supply changes impacts the changes in the interest rate. So that's how the linkage will be functioning. And when we have to depict this on the graph, money supply is fixed MS. This is the liquidity preference curve. At the rate of interest is quantity of money. Then we will draw investment and rate of interest relationship. And thirdly, the ADAS model. So this is the income line. We are at this level of aggregate demand. Now, if we see, for example, let's say the money supply increases in the economy. So money supply curve will shift towards right. We are seeing fall in the rate of interest to this level. Now, when interest rate is falling, so let's suppose we were at this point. Now, fall in interest rate will increase the investment in the economy. When investment increases, so the AD graph will shift up to new level of investment, because this gap is showcasing the change in investment which has happened. With this, you can see that we are moving towards a higher level of national income in the economy. So that's how you can see that the change in money supply it has led to increase in the national income in the economy. So this is the Keynesian idea related to monetary policy. Also, we'll take up Keynesian aggregate supply. How the graph is drawn, that is little different. So it is this is the shape, and let's say we are at this initial position of aggregate demand curve. So this is, if this is the intersection, you can say this comes out to be the output level. This is the price level initially. So Keynes has believed that the wages and the prices are sticky in nature. And when we were covering the classical model, we believed that the prices and wages, they are flexible, which in a way helps in restoring the full employment equilibrium. So in this case, since we are covering the Keynes aggregate supply, so he believes both these variables, they are sticky in nature, they're not going to change. That is why this portion is perfectly elastic in nature, because again, price is not going to change so easily because of its sticky nature. And when we see, let's say, the again, not only the supply side factors, but in the Keynesian model, we see that aggregate demand or the demand side factor is factors or demand side of the economy is emphasized more. So he gave more weightage to the demand side. So that will also be deciding the changes in the total output in the economy. So if aggregate demand now increases, now you will see we are at the full employment, or this becomes the full employment. This is the initial position with the outward shift. So that's how you just have to remember the shape of the AS of Keynes. Now, one important theory is accelerator theory of investment. So one very common term that we were using while covering the Keynes ISLM model was the multiplier. We calculated investment multiplier, government expenditure multiplier, tax multiplier. So here, similarly, we have the word accelerator, but the meaning is completely opposite to that of what the Keynesian multipliers were implying. For example, under Keynes, the multiplier meant like what is going to be the increase or the increase in the total output in the economy because of increase in let's say the investment. If that is changing by a certain amount, the amount of increase in the total output of the GDP is going to be in multiples of increase in the investment or change in the investment. But here, under the accelerator theory, the meaning is completely opposite. It is stating that when income or the consumption increases in the economy, it will lead to increase in investment by multiple amounts. So it is completely the opposite way of working of the multiplier theory. So because investment will be increasing by multiple, so we will need to produce more commodities. For that, we will require more amount of capital and more of capital assets, because consumption demand is increasing. So more goods are being demanded that will be produced after the investment is also increasing by multiple amount. So in equation or in algebraic form, we can write KT is the amount of the capital which was required to produce YT amount of output, and given we have this capital output ratio which is represented by small v. So this is the equation for this. So you can say the changes which are happening in the output, they are made possible by the capital stock. And increase in capital stock can be represented as, this is the capital stock in time period t minus the capital stock in time period t minus 1. So this becomes the difference or the change which happens in the capital stock. And since v is constant, so again output time period t minus output in time period t minus 1. So we can say in a way this part is investment or the gross fixed capital formation that we use. So investment is written correctly like this, and we can write this in a simplified manner. So investment equation can be written in a simplified way like this. So with increase in the level of income, we will see the investment will be increasing by V times more than the income. So V in a way we can say is accelerator in this model. And when we talk about critique of this particular model, so firstly we see that Calder, a famous economist, he stated that we cannot assume that the values of the accelerator throughout the entire trade cycle or in whichever stage of the business cycle we are, it cannot be always constant. That accelerator cannot behave in same manner exactly all the times always. So this is one critique. Secondly, we can say that we have assumed that no machines or no capital asset is idle, which is again not realistic. No machines are idle, or also assumed there's no overtime like concept which exists in the economy, which is again not matching with the practical life. And thirdly, we say that in the capital goods industry, we say that there exists surplus productive capacity. So, but again, this is possible when the demand for machines that has increased permanently, because we use the term surplus productive capacity, where capital assets play very important role in terms of deciding the productive capacity. But that surplus can only exist when there's a permanent, we can say, increase in the demand for machines. If that is not permanent or fluctuating, or it is variable, then actualizing this thing is again something which is next to impossible. So this is the critique, and that's how the accelerator theory of investment works. And so in real life, if we think about any example related to accelerator theory, most often we see that the Keynesian multiplier theory is more of practical in nature, because increase in output will be leading to more of reinvestment. or when we are talking about, let's say, example for this, the pent up demand after COVID-19, which we saw that led to increase in the income and the consumption, or the consumption demand majorly, we can say that increased, and that somehow it led to increase in the investment for a very short time period. So that is the example, and with this we finish with all the smaller subtopics that we had to cover today. So thank you so much for joining us on Ansarkari.